I'm going to set my clock. Too much technology there, my dear. Just, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Just set my timer over here. In fact, I'm a bit probably obsessed about the quantified self at the moment. I start my timer. I started my pulse rate before. I'm training for the marathon at the moment, so I'm just interested to see what presenting does to my pulse rate and how things go and what questions I get. And we'll be posting it on Strava later tonight. And maybe, if it gets it high enough, I'll call it a gym session, and none of you will let that out. So thank you. I'll use the microphone. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about Margot. Who is Margot? Well, Margot is a chatbot that we launched about 3 or 4 weeks ago for Lidl. And, well, let me just play you a short video.
Want the microphone higher, please?
Let me... It's just my height. It's all right for you over there, but you know. Okay. I'm going to play a short video introducing Margot, and then I'm going to explain a little bit about the story, the journey I've been on with some of my colleagues and the team at Lidl, and what we do in supermarkets. So let's play this. That's Margot. We launched her officially about 4 weeks ago now, and there's been some really good responses to it. And I want to perhaps enlighten you as to perhaps a little bit more about the process and some of the journey behind that. We're really excited about it. And really, what was the challenge? Well, first of all, Lidl, if you haven't been there, you've probably been familiar with the store. Britain's fastest growing supermarket. They're really challenging, hot on the heels of the incumbent giants, and I think they're embracing the technology, and they've got a really good agile mentality. And I think if we just think back at what David said before, was it 2 billion messages exchanged between businesses and customers per month? They're starting to realise the potential for an extra customer service channel. So you're thinking about here, how can we help customers with a specific use case? And I think that's really where the point of interest started within their e-commerce team. It's around, how do we have success or capitalise on the success we've had selling wine? I mean, you've heard all the stories. People will literally kill themselves or kill each other to get a bottle of Prosecco when they come out at Lidl. So they have 800 stores in the UK at the moment. But the challenge really is, the typical customer service or the person within the supermarket isn't really a trained sommelier, and they're not going to really be able to advise you which Zinfandel goes well with the chicken or whatever. So they needed to embellish and enhance the in-store resources to help people make better wine purchasing decisions. So how do we share this expertise? This is a great use case, I think, for a chatbot where consistency across the whole brand is really important and integral. So we've got a good use case over here. The idea really was to place AI on every single mobile. And how do we do that? Do we create an app? I think, how many people here, just a show of hands, think we've reached saturation points? How many people are thinking that apps are on the wane? Okay, not as many as I thought, because what I'm sensing in the market is that you're not going to download an app for every single retail experience out there. What you're going to try and do is use a channel that's already there. And how many people have Facebook Messenger on their phone already? Let's just see that. There you go. I mean, you'd be more inclined to use a channel that's already existing. So that was really their starting premise, which is the most ubiquitous channel that we can use. How can it scale as needed? What can we do with it? Food pairing. And the wine selection search, as well as a quiz and getting that interaction, that engagement. So those were some of the things that we were working with when we started off the pilot a couple of months ago. Some facts here, some figures before I go into some more details. So there's now 220 individual food wine recommendations. We've got 640 different grapes that Margot knows about. Anybody care to tell me why Margot might be the name of this chatbot?
Red wine.
It's a red wine. It's a region in France, in Bordeaux, which is where Lidl source most of their wine from. So Margot, and there's also, I think, a tentative link to. I was looking for a bonus point. Any sitcom that Margot comes to mind? 2 characters from a 1990s sitcom. 1990 sitcom, Stranger Things. Well, don't know what channel you're on, mate, but, or what you've been drinking tonight. No, with Tom and Jerry, The Good Life. There you go, The Good Life, Margot. So I think you're also giving it a personality. You're catering for the demographic, and I think that's also really important when you're thinking about, all the technology. Is how do you package it up? How do you give it that persona? So we've got it in 845 stores. In Easter, you're going to start to see the branding appear round about there. We're launching a few more wines, and there's going to be a lot of advertising encouraging people to go to that channel, and people are going to start to see the posters going up then. Emojis, we'll talk about emojis. We've got 88 different emojis in the app now. And there are 1,794 things that our aspect natural language understanding ontology classifies as food. So what were some of the challenges? It's about balancing natural language understanding, NLU, and the buttons. So you've got pros and cons for each of these. It's getting that balance right. So buttons are faster than typing. They're unambiguous. You've got a clear menu system over there. Am I going to be able to do a little laser point? Probably.
You do.
I do I? Over there. So you can see it's very easy to get the buttons and get it right. So they're unambiguous. You can just quickly, there you go. I wasn't going to risk it with doing any demos. I know what it's like. I've done too many demos before where something doesn't work, so we prepared this earlier. But buttons, they don't work for everything though. So there's 200 plus wine pairings. There's large sets of FAQs, so it's about getting that balance right and allowing you to have those follow-up questions, having a dialogue, turn taking, those turns of phrase. So, we have to think about as many diverse inputs as possible when you're designing a chatbot. You're having that dialogue. You have buttons, emoji, individual terms. So you've got what's telegraphic input, where people, some people like to write a war and peace almost. It's funny as we were doing the launch, just seeing the different things that people were typing into it and how some are much longer than others. Whereas some people do full sentences, some people are very staccato. So you've got to think about these. So those are some of the considerations. Looking at the design, one of the big factors where we had to make a decision was, do we launch it on the Lidl UK existing web page, which has 1.7 million followers or likes, or do we create our own unique web page for Margot? And that was a bit of an internal discussion, and it took the customer service team, I think, a bit of thinking about what we should do. Initially, we were going to come up with just a standalone Facebook page, but then I think what we've learned is that it works best when you're using an existing channel that's already popular. So we actually went for the Lidl UK page, which meant instantly there's already an addition to what you've got there. So it branches off, but we had to take into account that static customer service page. So we branched it out into Margot the Wine Bot, and the 4 different elements: FAQs, food pairing, finding the wine, and taking the quiz. The customer service we're leaving for another day. So you think about how that works, and then you think about the complexity, because we're not just going to go right from one to the other. We want this to be fluid, so you can link from one to the other to anyone as you would in a conversation. And I think that's really important in terms of the way the logic and the ontology is designed, and we've got the synonyms. So you could go from, what do you have that goes with chicken? And then Chardonnay is a sure win for chicken. If you're cooking a special dish, it'll give you that. So do you have any Chardonnays under 10 quid? So you're going to go for finding a wine. So it's really important that you can have these different questions answered. Some of the challenges around natural language input. So what pairs with roast chicken? You've got to think about the intent. What's the intent behind the question? I think that's really key here. And what data have you got? So I think, like with anything, when you're talking about a chatbot, it needs to be trained, and it's only as good as the input that you've got in it. It's only as good as the data. People forget that. It has to learn from something. The reason why I think this has been quite successful is because the head of e-commerce both has a love of technology and a love of wine. I don't mean that Alex Murray is a big drinker, that he may be, but I won't cast aspersions there. What I will say is that he was for 6 years the head of wine category at Waitrose. He knows his wine. This was a labour of love, and I think it's been blessed with someone who was really passionate about it and really spent time making sure that the data was good and it all sort of followed through. I think that's also a big learning here, where some chatbots have failed. It's very superficial and it doesn't necessarily necessarily give you the kind of experience that you demand. Now, let's not pretend this isn't meant for those sort of connoisseurs who know everything about wine, but it's trying to help people who have an average knowledge make a better decision. So, you're looking at things around synonyms and misspellings. This is another classic challenge, I think, when making a chatbot. When you're looking at chips, someone says French fries. These are all bundled together. Hamburgers, burger, beef burgers. What do you do when someone misspells it? Or, this happens a lot. How do you catch these things out? How do you avoid that? I'm sorry, I don't understand you. Which really knocks me off when I'm listening, Google Home and ask him or her something. So you've really got to try and think about all of these things here. Now, one of the things that our platform has is a lot of domain ontologies, and it's something that's growing all the time. So it's, we've got over 215 different ontology dictionaries, if you will, or lexicons, and it's growing all the time. And that allows us to make the connections between meat and categorization, say between poultry and what are the different types of poultry. It can be chicken, turkey, goose. Someone informed us on day one. But what can I have with deer? But brilliant, we're learning all the time. It's not one of the not one of the special offers this week in Lidl, I'm afraid. But you've got coq au vin, roast chicken. You can start to see how this starts to make these connections. So that's a little bit behind what goes on, I think, over here. And that allows you to see different types of pastas with different wines and different sauces. I think that's really important. Which pairs with what? Making that synthesis between linguine, tagliatelle. I'm not so well versed in all the different types of pasta, but there must be something like about 20 different types of pastas here that can all link together. I think that's really also useful. Other challenges, natural language queries. So you've got naturally expressed queries. You've got the challenge then of extracting the search parameters, normalization and echoing the extraction, taking that out and then moving it around. Those are some of the technical things. FAQs, anticipating what the customers are going to say. What questions will they ask? I mean, who here who's designed a chatbot has thoroughly thought out the questions that they're going to be asked first of all? I think that's really important as well. If you don't know your audience and you get making it quite niche allows you to be quite successful in there. You're not trying to boil the ocean. How will they ask them? So, how did it go? I mean, when we launched it, we didn't really know how the market was going to react to it. This is one of my favourite things. It was on the Huffington Post. You can still see it there. I'm just going to play this short video. So, how did we do that? You can start to see where I think it's been extremely successful. Where it's been really successful is where you've got these sort of binary kind of questions and answers. And I think, that's the stage we're at with chatbots now, the opinions, where you're asking opinions and trying to get things that are a bit subjective. They're challenging areas. So, we've got to determine that question set. You've got to optimise for the top end. You're not going to be able to make a chatbot for everybody on day one. Think about the Pareto principle, 80-20. Think about data rather than intuition. Start small and grow. Variations on a question. So you're thinking about, for different age, different demographics, we're going to start to be able to use information on people's profiles within Facebook, so you can perhaps orient the question based on certain things about region, socio-economic group, their language background, those are the kind of things. And we also, in part of the development process, we crowdsourced the collection of questions. So we first of all had an internal set of users within the Lidl community, but we also used Amazon Mechanical Turk, who you may have heard of, where we provided variations to are pricier wines better, and we got various answers here. So, are expensive wines better? Are expensive wines superior? Are cheap wines bad? So we've got a lot of information, but do be careful. You're going to have a lack of linguistic diversity if you don't have the right sourcing. So, those are some of the pitfalls over here. And I think, you've got to think about the jeopardy approach, where the respondent is going to be putting in the question before we've got the answers, but we don't know what the question's going to be. Remember that game show Jeopardy? So, thinking about, the questions again, it's really important, and, trying to also emphasise that it's not just about price, and that, the quality is really important as well. We also had challenges around discourse flow. I think this is these are some generic observations that I think is worth sharing. Full sentences, accommodating every user's, the ambiguity, any question, anywhere. I think I mentioned, touched on that before. Language, because you want to have a design once, deploy it everywhere approach. And, depending on the language that is first of all entered by the user, that's going to determine how it's answered. So at the moment, we've done it for, I think this was one of the reasons why Lidl chose to partner with us, because obviously they're a German company. Lidl. I got told, if you want to win our business, you've got to start calling us Lidl, not Lidl. After about the third time, I cottoned on to that and made sure everyone in my company did. The point is here, language. I think a good chatbot framework doesn't require you to reinvent it for different languages. So at the moment, we've done it for English. But what if they now entered the language in German? Are we going to ask them to change the chatbot? No, it would recognise that it's a German one. We're in the process of doing a German transposition of this. It's already got 17 languages built into it, so that's not going to take us too long. And then you've got lower confidence, like Polo. Where does that one come out as at? So we've used the past history of the user there to determine language. So I think that's really important when you're ubiquitous on the platform. You have to have multiple languages and using a default language of Facebook Messenger and prompting for language potentially. So let's, some of the conclusions that we had here. The challenges, multiple modes of interaction, dialogue flow can naturally shift, achieving natural language coverage with linguistic diversity and language choice. Short on time, just wrapping up now, some of the exposure that we've had literally just in the last 2 weeks across trade media, the kind of publications that this is part of a customer experience solution. This is about customer service. I think when I speak with retailers, the important thing is not to just focus on what's shiny and new in tech, because that's great. I love the technology. We're all here because we have a passion for technology. We want to advance the next generation of technology. But how does this fit into the customer service paradigm, where you're putting the customer in the centre of the universe? What is the strategic thinking behind that? And so that's really where I'm thinking about, how does the contact centre evolve? How do we prevent rather than cure? How do we fend things off so that the agent has a better experience? And how do we do more with less? I think that's the challenge of our age. You just need to look at the headlines. Nearly every major supermarket has had to let some staff go recently because this is part of it. I'm not trying to, again, I'm treading on thin ice, when you start to talk about the future of the labour market and what automation and AI is going to do. These are big topics and, I'm sure we've all got opinions on that. But this is part of a customer service strategy, and I think that's really important here. And it's not just about customers, it's equally applied to internal. I'm having a lot of conversations with HR people at the moment on how this can become a digital employee, how you can, instead of HR getting the same questions, where's my P60? You can use this in the same kind of context as well. Some of the coverage we've had over here, again, Telegraph, Retail Gazette, Mail Online, loved it. So we've had some really nice feedback, and I think this helps the market in general. And seeing stories like this, is great because it's starting to get some traction in a company that is actually, wouldn't associate Lidl with being, a tech-savvy company. They don't, even do deliveries, or you can't even do an e-commerce at the moment. But soon we're going to allow you to actually buy some of the wine with the chatbot, and that's, one of the benefits of having a PCI compliant chatbot. So, for big businesses, that's really important, the PCI compliance, all the regulations, all that boring stuff which I can't stand, but it's absolutely critical if you're going to start taking payments and doing that through Facebook. So a little bit about the platform. If this is a pitch, I don't know, but try not to make it. It's a design once, deploy anywhere approach. So CXP, Customer Experience Platform, that's what we call it. And it started off as IVR, interactive voice recognition, and then we moved it to text, through apps, and now to social. So you can deploy it once, and what's really interesting is, the different channels, whether it's voice, text, or visual. We have adapters, we have self-service logic, and what we can do is then connect it to your CRM or your ERP. So obviously we've done it with a Facebook Messenger, but I thought I'd just show you, this is a little bit of a teaser. This is something that we turned around within a week of launching Facebook Messenger. They were always interested in what are we going to be doing with voice. So this isn't publicly available, but this was something that we literally turned around within a couple of days. And let me just bring this video up. Hopefully there won't be anything too worrying to play. I think I'll put the link on here.
I'm Margot, Lidl's wine chatbot. I can help pick a wine to go with food, find a specific
You're not going to say
wine
anything more exciting than
grade
this picture,
or
anyway,
price, and much more. How can I help?
I'm making roast beef tonight. What's good with that?
Juicy roast beef needs a juicy red wine, preferably one with higher levels of tannin. These wines will go nicely with roast beef. St. Emilion Grand Cru for £10 and 99 pence. Chima Rosa Winemakers Selection Privé Special for £7 and 99 pence.
Think about a pilot, think about a good use case, map your customer journey, try to be, I think, reining in some of the ambition of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, and set yourself something that's going to excite your audience, you know, and can go for maximum impact. That's really the approach we've taken with the supermarkets particularly. You know, you look at the innovation, you look at the heads of e-commerce, they're trying to sell this internally as well. You know, they had a small budget, you know, we did this for, you know, as much to try and proof of concept, and now this is something that's rolling out and, you know, hopefully on a global basis. So those are some of the learnings I wanted to share with you. If we've got time for any questions, be happy to answer a couple, and thank you for listening.